Alright, today we will do a live review of the Glenmorangie, the original 10-year-old Highland Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. This is a Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton product. It is 40% ABV, 80 proof, chill filtered, color added. And this is a mix of first and second fill ex-bourbon matured casks that come from Jack Daniels and Heaven Hill. We do know that these are Jack Daniels and Heaven Hill barrels. Again, Glenmo does procure their own barrels in Missouri and then leases them to Jack Daniels and Heaven Hill. So that's how we know for kind of some amount of a fact that this is going to be Jack Daniels and Heaven Hill ex-bourbon barrels because of this kind of like very selective wood policy that they have. Switch category and title. Oh man, you're right. Stop right there, criminal scum. I totally forgot to do that part. Ooh. Done. And if you're joining us on youtube.com, know that we do these whiskey segments weekdays, 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch TV. If you want to come partake in the chat, I'd love to have you. Is everything after second fill just considered ex-bourbon? So this is the way I kind of think of barrels and how they're named. So obviously, you know, a virgin oak or a new charred oak is a barrel that hasn't been used before. But typically those are used by bourbon because bourbon has to use those. But you can get virgin oak in Scotch, a new charred oak. They do get used in Scotch sometimes. But typically this gets used by bourbon. As soon as it's used by bourbon, it is now no longer a virgin oak barrel, but we would call this a first fill ex-bourbon barrel because this is the first time it's been filled since it was used for bourbon. So when we talk about first fill sherry or first fill ex-bourbon, that means that they've not been used since they had the ex-bourbon, since they had the bourbon in it or since they had the sherry in it. Now, if we talk about second fill ex-bourbon, that means new charred oak, used for bourbon, then used for a Scotch. Now we're on the second fill of ex-bourbon. So we're on the second Scotch that's been in here since there was bourbon in them. And some people just call second fill refill. But when you say refill bourbon, that typically means any fill after the first fill. It could be the second fill, it could be the fourth fill, it could be the 18th fill, so long as the barrel still is functional. So refill is like very low impact. Now they're specific here in saying that it's first and second fill. So they do have some what I would consider refill casks in there because second fill to me is like pretty refill. Because when you think about it, it's like, well, yeah, you had bourbon in here for 4 to 7 years, and then you put Scotch in here for like 12 years. It probably got most of the bourbon kind of character out of there in that first 12-year cycle. But there could be some left, so I guess you couldn't call it second fill. But to me, anything after the first fill is a refill bourbon. But they want you to know for sure that it's not older than second fill, I guess. They don't want you to confuse the word refill with like third or fourth fill. But yeah, refill is kind of like anything after the first fill, and that happens after the bourbon. Of course, Glenmo. Do they have a giraffe on here? I think they have a giraffe on the box. They do have a giraffe on the box right here. Sometimes we equate Glenmo with the giraffe because they have the tallest stills in Scotland, like a giraffe, very long and tall, and it creates a very light, very effervescent spirit with lots of copper contact, not as robust and oily as some other squat still might give you. That was not very poppy. I'm disappointed. And of course, this is the 10-year-old Glenmoe, the original, not to be confused with the now in circulation 12-year Glenmoe, the original. So this is the old bottling. And I'm going to attempt to keep the rest of this liquid in this bottle until we get a 12-year-old one so that we can do a bit of an A-B comparison between the 10 and the new edition, the 12-year-old. But we should get a review in of the 10-year-old. That being said, I'm pretty sure this is colored, but it wouldn't be colored too much. It would just be colored a little bit. 10-year in a first and second fill ex-bourbon probably gets you a color pretty close to this anyways. Depends on how much refill bourbon is in there, how much second fill bourbon is in there. It's pretty good coloration, so I could see how them adding a couple drops of 150 into this, and I assume that that is the case. We're going to put this on the old rotator cuff. So we're going to let that chill for just a minute. I wonder if Glenmoe's got something in the whiskey opus for me to read like real quick, like real quick and easy. And again, we're going to rate this out of 100. 25 points for aroma, 25 points for palate, 25 points for finish, 10 for texture, and 15 for my overall personal experience. G. I need M. Glenlivet. Moray. Shouldn't it be like here? The alphabetical order in this book is like kind of odd. Now we're in Macallan somehow. See, it's weird. A lot of these are like listed under their like owner, like like a bunch of stuff is listed under Diageo. Which is in D and not in their right section. 82, 83. I don't know why it's back here, but yes, the Glenmoe. There's the Signet. This is that big expensive bottle, which I think this one is made with heavily roasted malt or something like that. Very like coffee and mocha world. Pretty expensive though. Here it does talk about the tallest stills. Whiskey stills come in all shapes and sizes, and their variations play a significant part in shaping the character of the spirit produced. Perhaps no distillery has placed more emphasis on the individuality of his stills than Glenmorangie. One print advertising campaign carries the illustration of the vessels in question and declares that there are a lot of perfectly good single malts made in shorter stills. We have the tallest stills in Scotland. They are based on the design of the original ex-gin stills from London installed when the distillery was founded and contribute significantly to the light, fruity, floral character of Glenmorangie. So this was originally... originally they used ex-gin stills. That's interesting. We're curious to learn more about that at some point. All right, so one of the like characters that I'm going to go in a little bit biased to on this one, because it's something I've always gotten out of this particular bottle, is kind of like an orangey citrus note and kind of a creamy character, like an orange and cream, vanilla, and orange set of notes. Some people also get something like a marmalade from this particular bottle. It's very much on the citrus, on the floral character. Very like Highland in that way. And just immediately right away, there's like notes of like orange citrus. I'll definitely go into like orange blossom, vanilla. So heavy on that citrus character. But it's definitely sweet. It's definitely not like your lemon kind of like citrus. It's definitely a sweet citrus. Um, Orange is just a great place to put that. Yeah, fruity and floral and sweet. Orange, vanilla, honey, some floral character to it. It's really a lovely impression. It's so like unique and distinct for me. You really get this distillery having its own kind of character. Like when you talk about a Highland ex-bourbon malt, um, this definitely carries its own unique signature um, that I feel like you could easily pick out of a lineup. There's a little bit of malt character in there, but it's not that strong. All on that citrus. I was grabbed this the other day and went for the Aberlour 12. Man, those are two great options. Um, can't go wrong with either one, really. I have not gotten the Aberlour 12. I'll get to it eventually, but I do know that some publications have called it one of the best values in single malt, the 12-year-old Aberlour. But this is a great value to this one. I already know off the top of my head that the price that you pay for the flavor you get out of this, kind of crazy actually for an 80 proofer. That being said, there's not a lot of huge complex characters going on here. You get a uniqueness. There's a unique combination of notes, that orange, citrus, vanilla, whisper of malt, some floral, some honey sweet, but that's it. Not much to hunt in there. Pretty thin looking on the glass, which is to be expected. It's kind of flopping around a little bit. Slancheva. You can tell it's you can tell it's 80 proof. It's a little thin on the entry. That being said, the texture of it is pretty nice. So there's an interesting contrast here between the idea that it is a little bit thin, it's a little bit on the a little too much watery side, but there's a good mouthfeel that I would almost consider to be similar to like a triple distillation kind of mouthfeel, where it's smooth, light, and really, again, effervescent is a good word to use. It's very just floaty on the palate in terms of texture. You gotta like hold it on the tongue for a little bit to kind of get some of that citrus to come out. Some like sweet malty character in there too. Kind of like we'll say like barley sugar, like the malty note is kind of sweet. Get a little bit of vanilla in there. Orange creamsicle kind of thing. And on the finish, you get a little bit of that spice. Not terribly long of a finish. Oh, actually, some allspice on the nose. We won't call that generic baking spice. I'm trying to get better at that. What I actually did is I'm trying to get away from calling things generic baking spice, but it's really hard to not call it cinnamon or generic baking spice. But I did A, B, C, D compare a bunch of baking spices on the nose the other day. Cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, allspice, I think pumpkin spice. I basically just went back and forth on these things from the spice rack to try to like hone in on what these individual characters might be. So we're gonna try to like be a little bit better about that. It's very difficult though. Most I think spice notes to me are cinnamon, but in this particular instance, I like allspice. Because it's got just a little bit more zing to it. What? I'm up here and you're down there. You know what that means. But yeah, still on the citrus, still on the vanilla, orange blossom. Held long on the tongue, you get some of that sweet malty note, some citrus still. Not too vanilla on the palate. And into the finish, again, that kind of like cinnamon baking spice, quality, a little bit of wood, a little bit of malt in there. We're gonna call this finish length medium minus. It's not terribly long. That being said, I enjoy the arrangement of flavors here. They're not terribly complex, but they have a certain level of uniqueness. It's very drinkable. They're not like super duper strong, but you know, for 80% or 80 proof or 40% alcohol, it's a pretty good flavor impact. You're not really hunting for flavors at all. The entry is a little bit thin. You do have to hold it long on the tongue to get the most appreciation of the palate, but I think for a kind of like, what are you doing? Easy to drink Highland. It's quite tasty. Excuse me. Are you trying to knock that over? What do you think you're doing? Come over here. Oh yeah, like now in with the marmalade. I like marmalade note at this particular point. A little bit of development there. Definitely get that allspice. What? Oh, is Moses getting into something over there? He doesn't come on the camera very much. Yeah, he's getting into stuff over there. Look at him. Oh, what a naughty boy. Yeah, it's definitely cinnamon on the finish. Some citrus and malt still in there. A little bit of oak. Medium minus is a good length. Despite being watery, the texture is pretty reasonable. Just because it's so light. And again, texture is kind of a subjective metric, but it's kind of like the idea between just how it feels, how it coats the mouth. This one does have a bit of a wateriness to it, but it still is kind of light and floaty. So that kind of like gives it a kind of a subjective texture advantage. Again, similar to like a triple distillation texture. You're obstructing my hands. What would we call this on the aroma? It's a good amount of notes. Nothing terribly super duper crazy going on. But I like that marmalade creeps in there. I like that kind of like allspice impact. Of course, we're in there with the citrus, floral, honey, vanilla sort of realm. Let's give it, ooh, grab my mouse. Let's give it, a good 17. 17 on the aroma. I'm going to focus on the palate, which, you know, is maybe a little bit on the wanting side. Again, pretty lacking on the attack. Do get some sweet malt, a little bit of citrus, some spice in there. Yeah, it's not the greatest. Honestly, let's give the palate 13. And on to the finish. Again, some initial notes of a cinnamon. I need to cleanse, darling. Oh. Ooh. Cinnamon, some barrel in there, slight orange. A little bit malty. Not particularly long. I'm kind of thinking it's in like the 13 to 16 realm, but I'll give it a minute of focus. In with the cinnamon, some wood, whisper of a sweet malty note, whisper of a citrus. Kind of a spicy, woody, a bit of maltiness lingers. I call it finish 14. Now out of 10, let's talk about the texture. So we have an interesting juxtaposition on the texture where we can tell there's a little bit of extra water in here, but it's still contributing to like kind of a light, effervescent, smooth mouthfeel. Now you're going to get up. You can take my water? Yeah, Mosley's puking over there. There's no rug there anymore. He can't puke on the rug anymore. We got rid of that rug. Cats are gross. Yeah. I mean, they just, you know, they got a thing where every once in a while they gotta just let it out, you know? It's pretty common. That's the one thing. That's the one thing about them. They gotta let out like good old hair clump every once in a while. Texture can have a 4. It's like, whatever. It's okay. Always showing off their b-holes? Yeah, I mean, and if you get 2... Let's just say, the rim jobs can be pretty common. Butthole hider for cats. I'm not sure what that really even means. It hangs from their tails? What? Are people really that offended by the cat's butt? Oh, I see. It's like a little... It's like a little necklace that goes on their tail. I mean, that's even more weird, in my opinion. It kind of looks like you're drawing attention to it. I don't know about that. All right. Out of 15, my overall experience with this particular single malt Scotch whiskey, this Highland single malt Scotch whiskey, I do think there's some unique qualities here. Definitely loud on that citrus, marmalade, vanilla. Definitely get some of that malt in there. I do like the combination of flavors present. They kind of work well together. They provide a unique, identifiable Glenmorangie profile. Definitely feels like you could pick this Glenmorangie up out of a lineup of blind Highland ex-bourbon scotches. That being said, there's not a lot of complex things going on here. There's not a lot of like vast angles or anything. It's a little bit simplistic on the palate and finish. Nose is pretty decent. A little bit on the watery side too. The attack is kind of notably lacking in initial flavor. Kind of have to really hold it on the tongue for a while to get the palate to really present what it's capable of, which is not the best. That being said, it's tasty enough that I can't say that this is a forgettable whiskey, but it's not doing enough to stand out. We'll give it a 6 out of 15. This is a distinct whiskey. Texture. Okay. So if we put these together, 17 and 13 and 14 and 4 and 6 is 54. 54 out of 100. We'll call this a good whiskey.